And you've even got me and yourselves in the corner. This is slick.
Wow, we do it all, baby.
All right. So we're going to talk about pitching. And to do that, I need to just explain a little bit about me. Specifically, I have had a great success doing cartooning for many years. My most successful cartoon was a comic strip I created called Jim's Journal, which ran in newspapers for about 10 years. And I made a good living at that. And that actually led to my second biggest success, which was I was one of the founders of The Onion. And after about a year, I bought it and became owner, editor-in-chief, which I was for many years, and only recently got out of it just a few years ago for the final time. And I've also written and directed 2 feature films, Spaceman and Bad Meat, both of which sold for independent distribution. One was made in '96, the other one in 2002, I think. And boy, I learned a lot from that. And I'm also a #1 best-selling author. So this is a great adjective if you can get it before your name, because it allows you to give speeches and it makes you an important authority. You can go on the radio. And there's a trick, I guess, that you can do to become a #1 best-selling author, at least a #1 New York Times best-selling author, where the New York Times doesn't just count the numbers of how many books are sold. They have a very Rube Goldbergian process whereby they count the books sold in different stores and all these other things. And if you hire someone, they will buy books in all the stores that matter and they'll get you on the list. And it's really pathetic. I've never done it, heard about it. I actually got on the bestseller list with my first self-published book, and I hand delivered that book to bookstores and collected the money myself, didn't have a publisher or anything. And it just happened to do well in all the bookstores where the New York Times counts books. And that was an amazing, surprising thing to happen for me. And I was able to parlay that into getting a literary agent, which really helped out when we were starting up The Onion and starting to do books. But I'll get into a little bit more of that later on. There's some of my other books that have been bestsellers. A few Onion books have hit #1 on the list. That's where I got my #1. My first self-published book is that book, I Went to College and It Was Okay, which only peaked at #9 on the list, but still best-selling author, you can't beat it. And I'm also the winner of many prestigious awards. So I have won the Peabody, I've won the Thurber Prize for American Humor, and at my latest count, I and my work have won more Webby Awards than any single individual or organization. So very proud of that and very exciting. So I also created ONN, which is an offshoot of The Onion, which was The Onion's news video wing or arm. And that led to 2 successful network TV shows, one on IFC and one on Comedy Central. And I've also pitched a lot of shows. And like I said, done a lot of things that weren't successful. These are kind of my biggest successes here. So I wanted to lay that groundwork and explain all that before we get into the pitching, because we're going to refer back to some of these details as we talk about that. So how I achieved all of those things is through goals. I'm a big believer in goal setting. And I want to run through a little goal setting workshop with you guys now in case you don't have specific goals for yourselves, for your careers, and in case you don't have either short-term or long-term ideas about what you want to achieve in your life. I think it's critically important. The people who have specific big goals typically achieve them. People who have small, modest goals typically achieve those. We kind of like, wherever we set the goalposts, like that's typically what we do. People who have no goals typically just kind of flounder around and drift from thing to thing and don't really get anywhere. So the first part of this goal setting workshop is I advise you to think of pie in the sky goals. What's the most outrageous impossible dream that you have. Make that your goal. So when Jim Carrey was living in a one-room apartment, his goal was to make $7 million in one movie. And anyone who knew him at the time would have said, "You're nuts." But he put that goal on a Post-it note and he put it on his mirror and he looked at it every day while he was making faces in the mirror. And of course, one day he did make $7 million per movie. He even made more than that. That's just one example. The point is, if his goal had been make $300 in a movie, he probably would have achieved it and he would have been satisfied. He would have done that little independent film. Maybe it would have been, oh, what was that first movie he did where it was, there was Lauren Hutton, I think, was in it, and it was about a vampire. Can't remember. That would have been his only movie. He would have retired. Say that again?
Was it Once Bitten?
Once Bitten, thank you. And so that's the power of pie in the sky goals. Pie in the sky goals can really make a big career. And it's really just a matter of coming up with it, just thinking about it. So what you do is you have to write them down. You have to write down your big pie in the sky goals, and you have to make them specific, and you have to make them emotional so that they resonate with you and you remember them. I'm sure you've all heard of vision boards. You know, that's another way to write goals down, but they should be written. They should be illustrated. There's even a thing now people do where they make a vision board movie and there's a company that will do that. If you pay them, I don't know, $100 or something, they'll put all this footage together and put it to inspiring music. So you can wake up every morning and listen to your goals and get you all revved up for the day. Not a bad idea. And the way you want to break those down is you want to write down your 1-year goals, your 2-year goals, and your 5-year goals. So the 5-year goal is going to be your big pie in the sky goal. And if it's really pie in the sky, like if it's, you want to be the king of all Hollywood, the king of the entertainment business, maybe make that a 10 or 20-year goal. But 5 is pretty reasonable for you to achieve just about anything you want to achieve in the entertainment business. Then break that down. What are you going to have to achieve in 2 years in order to get to that 5-year goal? And then what are you going to have to achieve in 1 year in order to get to that 2-year goal? And then what are you going to have to achieve every month? What are you going to have to achieve every week? What are you going to have to do every day to get you to that point? Write it down, plan it out, and stick to it. That's what I mean by break them down. Break down your goals. If you achieve your incremental goals, which again are going to be pretty easy daily tasks, it will naturally follow that you will achieve your pie in the sky goals. Now, in addition to Jim Carrey, I want to talk about this gentleman, Arnold Schwarzenegger, because he is the goal-setting master. And it's worth studying his life and work, because he was a poor kid in Austria who barely spoke English, who was scrawny and weird looking, and he had a big pie in the sky goal. He was going to be a big Hollywood movie star. I'm sure his friends just laughed out loud when he told them that. But he wrote it down and he planned it out. And he had a model too. He had a role model, this guy named Reg Park, who was a bodybuilder who had gotten cast in a Hercules movie. And he figured, well, I'll start bodybuilding. So at least I'll have this superhero body, and then maybe I can get cast in some of these movies, who knows? So he starts bodybuilding, and by the time he's 18, he looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he wins a Mr. Universe pageant. He actually goes AWOL from the Austrian army to take part in this contest that he wins. And then eventually he makes it to America. He learns English, he gets to America, and he continues bodybuilding. He continues winning competitions. So he's got that part nailed. But he doesn't have a lot of money, so he gets a job as a bricklayer. And he lays bricks with other bodybuilders. And of course, that's just more exercise for him. He's only getting bigger and more muscular. And then he has a goal that he's going to be a millionaire also. Here's another one of his audacious goals. And not a lot of people know this about Arnold. He became a millionaire before he became a movie actor. He decided the quickest way to become a millionaire was through real estate. So he met and befriended a very accomplished real estate person, saleswoman in the Los Angeles area, and befriended her and followed her around and learned everything he could from her, saved his money from laying bricks, saved his money from selling supplements that he started doing because of his bodybuilding fame. And he put a down payment on the apartment building that he lived in. He bought the apartment building. And as any of you know who know anything about money or investing, buying an apartment building is about the best investment you can make because it's just a money machine. People rent the apartments and you just have to make the payments, and you make more money every year as you raise the rent. And eventually he's a millionaire from owning this apartment building. So he still has his original goal of being a big Hollywood movie star, but now he goes into audition for roles and he takes meetings, and he's a spectacular specimen. He sounds weird, but he looks great. And a lot of big producers meet with him and they laugh at him and they're like, you'll never be a movie actor with that ridiculous accent. And because he's already a millionaire, he doesn't care. He doesn't need them. And he acts like too good for them. And he's like, oh, screw you, and he walks off. And they're blown away by that because in Hollywood, everyone's desperate. And so many actors would kill for even a small role in a movie. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is being talked about as a possible lead in a movie. And he storms out and says, screw you, I don't need this, makes him all the more attractive to them. And you know the rest of the story. He gets hired in Hercules, he gets hired in Terminator. The Pumping Iron documentary really catapults him to fame because he's such a character in that movie, even though he's just playing himself. And then his next goal is he wants to get into politics and he wants to marry a Kennedy. Who thinks that he achieved those goals also? Yes, he did. So here's Arnold's secret for achieving goals. He does all this that we talk about, but he does one extra step. It's what he calls locking in on it. And what he does is he visualizes the goal so vividly in his mind. And of course, to do that, he has to write it down. He has to have a very clear vision board. He locks in on it in his mind like a heat-seeking missile and targets it, and then he can't lose. Once he has it in his target, he will do anything to achieve that goal. He gets really serious about it. He breaks it down. He breaks down the steps, and he achieves what he wants to achieve. And as far as I know, he's achieved every single last thing he has ever achieved. He could have been president of the United States if he had only not been born in Austria. That's the only thing stopping him. And there were a lot of Republicans a few years ago talking about amending the Constitution to allow him to do that. So that's how powerful goal setting is. That a skinny, weird-looking kid who didn't speak a word of English could achieve so much in his life. The main thing about goal setting is you have to shoot for the moon. That's why you want the pie in the sky goal, because even if you miss, you're still among the stars. So, for example, my goal when I was a teenager was to be the next Steven Spielberg. I loved making movies and I wanted to be as big and powerful in the entertainment business as Steven Spielberg. I did not achieve that goal. I made a couple of movies and I did a comic strip and I created a newspaper that's become a very famous comedy institution. And that's a great calling card for me, but I'm not the next Steven Spielberg. However, I did pretty well. I'm among the stars. I had a great career. I'm still going in it. And things happen along the way. You decide, like for me, I made 2 films and I realized, you know what? Making movies is not really my strength. It's not right for my personality. It requires too much extroversion. I'm better off doing animation or short films or just comedy instead of movies, in any other format. And you need to be able to adjust your goals and go from there. But if you're on that trajectory of your pie in the sky goal, it's going to be easier to veer off on a tangent if your goals change, or if you learn about yourself and realize, that one's not really for me, or whatever the case. And I actually did get pretty close with the movie career, because after I'd made my second movie, I got an agent and a manager, and they took me around to a lot of different places in Hollywood, and I got offered a couple of films I got offered the movie that eventually became, I'm going to forget the name of it, but it was kind of like, there were two movies at the same time. Vin Diesel did one and Jackie Chan did one where they were a dad or a babysitter who was a spy on their secret life. And I was offered the Jackie Chan one. And I was also offered the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie. And for whatever reason, I didn't take those jobs. I didn't think the script for the first one was ready. And for the second one, I kind of misplayed the hand that I was dealt. So I, again, I was among the stars and everything worked out fine for me. But had I never had a goal, I never would have been anywhere close to any of those things. All right. So let's get into the how you might set goals for yourself and achieve them. Let's get into the down and dirty specifics. You have to learn your craft. One of the most important things about having a big goal and having daily steps to achieve it is that you're going to be doing work. You're actually going to be writing things, producing things, making things. And that's the best way to learn a craft in the entertainment business. You actually have to do it. It's delightful that you guys are at the Harold Ramis Film School. It's a great school because they make you produce things. People can get really caught up in theory and in dreams, and they can get caught up in really long projects like a short film that they work on for a year and a half. Don't ever work on a short film for a year and a half. Work on a short film for a week. Shoot it on your iPhone, get it done, move on to the next short film. And don't spend more than $200 on it. Anyone who spends more than $1,000 on a short film and spends a year and a half planning it and making it is signing up for failure, because there's nothing you can do with a short film. You can't distribute it anywhere. You can't make money with it anywhere. All you can do is go to festivals with it where you're with a bunch of other sad sack short film makers who aren't going to get anywhere. And it's very depressing. Very depressing. So learn your craft by producing over and over and over and producing a lot. I'm going to recommend my book to you, How to Write Funny, to learn your craft. After doing comedy for 2 or 3 decades, I wrote this book because I was really unsatisfied with the other books that were out there that taught people how to do humor and how to write it and make it successful. So I really wanted to spell it out, make it a no-nonsense how-to guide that would really shave years off of the process. Because in the past, people would always say, well, it takes years to learn comedy through trial and error. You have to do stand-up and bomb for 15 years before you're any good. And I thought, nah, I don't think so. I think you can do it faster. You just have to know how to do it and you have to practice it. So in this book, I tell you how to do it and I tell you how to practice it. So this book does shave years off the process. There have been people who took my Second City class when I taught this book in a class, who after just 8 weeks were getting hired as full-time comedy writers. And the core of that book, if you don't want to spend the $8 to buy it, are the 11 funny filters, which are the 11 different kinds of jokes that every professional comedy writer, performer, producer, director needs to know. They're the only 11 ways that things can be made funny, and you have to know them and you have to learn the rules of how to use them in order to write professional quality humor. And just very briefly, they are irony, character, reference, shock, hyperbole, parody, wordplay, analogy, madcap, misplaced focus, and meta humor. That's it. If you learn those and learn how to use those, you're set. You can write any joke. So one of the tips that I offer in the book that I want to share here is that quantity is the key to quality. The more work you produce, the better your chances of producing something good. That's another reason why working for a year and a half on one project is a terrible idea. Because if you produce a short film once a week on your iPhone, in a year and a half, you're going to have, how many is that? 75 short films. Who here thinks that among those 75 short films, you're going to have one that's amazing, especially compared to someone who's only made one short film in that time? Quantity is the key to quality. And nobody remembers the failures. Nobody remembers the bad stuff. They only remember the good stuff. So it's worth it to just keep producing, keep failing, keep trying to make stuff good, and then missing the mark a lot, because it only increases your chances of hitting the mark. Professionals are people who have many, many, many ideas. Amateurs are people who have one idea. So I recommend you write ideas down. It's one of the key assignments that I have in the How to Write Funny book. Write at least 10 ideas a day. They can be ideas for projects, ideas for jokes, ideas for movies, doesn't matter. You want to write them down on a piece of paper in your computer, whatever. Just free associate and write them down. Do it in 20 minutes. Don't spend all day. If something occurs to you while you're washing dishes, riding the bus, talking to people, make sure you capture that, write it down, and come up with 10 ideas a day. And then after a week or two, go through that idea list and divvy it up onto separate lists. You want a list of project ideas. You want a list of ideas that you might pitch, ideas for TV shows or movies. You're going to want a list of just funny ideas. That could be anything, could be jokes, could be sequences, could be anything. And then you want to have separate lists of all your TV show ideas, all your movie ideas, all your book ideas, all your podcast ideas, website ideas, stage show ideas, street art ideas, or just ideas for jokes. And if you do 10 ideas a day, you're going to have 70 ideas a week. And how many a month? 70 times 30, that's 270 a month. And then how many in a year? Thousands. That is an asset that any creative person would be crazy not to develop. If you're in your 20s and you're not putting a few dollars in a mutual fund every month, you're crazy. Because if you do that for 10 years, it's going to be worth $1 million when you're 60. You literally only have to do it for 10 years. The same thing is true with your idea lists if you want to be in the comedy business. You need that retirement account. You need that bank of hilarious ideas, because opportunities happen in the most unexpected ways in the comedy business. You might meet somebody at a party, or one of your friends might get a job somewhere, and they'll come to you and they'll say, hey, they're looking for writers, or hey, have you got any ideas for this and that? You don't want to be caught with your pants down and have no ideas. You want to go into your vault of thousands of ideas and pick out your best stuff, tailor-made for whatever opportunity just presented itself to you. So then you have to ask yourself, is pitching even right for your idea? I mentioned have a list of ideas that's just for pitching, but how do you decide which ideas should go on your pitching list and which ideas should go on other lists? I want to go through some of the conventional wisdom that you've probably heard about pitching ideas in Hollywood. One of the conventional bits of wisdom is that if you pitch an idea in Hollywood and sell it, you make a ton of money. You make fuck you money, basically. Another bit of conventional wisdom is that if you pitch an idea and sell it in Hollywood, you'll have no control. The Hollywood development executives will get their hands on it, and it'll go into development hell, and you'll lose all of your creative control over the project. However, the conventional wisdom of not pitching that idea and executing it yourself is that you do have control. You have total control. You don't have any suits telling you what to do. But the con of that, according to conventional wisdom, is that you're not going to make any money. Here's the actual wisdom. If you pitch an idea and sell it, that gives you legitimacy. That means within the entertainment industry, you are now a legitimate player. You have sold an idea. You're like a made guy in the mob. It's a calling card at parties. People are interested in you. People in Hollywood are interested in you if they know that other people are interested in you. And you have control. that's a myth about the conventional wisdom. If you pitch an idea in Hollywood and they buy it, they're not buying the idea, they're buying you. They want you to spearhead that idea with passion and execute it. They want to hand you the football and have you run for a touchdown. They don't necessarily want to take the idea and develop the life out of it and change it so you don't even recognize it. They don't want that. And I'll tell you one story to illustrate that. The Onion was just starting to become popular, and we got a call from a development executive at MTV. And he told me they had an idea for a show. They wanted to do a show. This is in the Beavis and Butthead era. They were looking for a VJ type of show with a cartoon president of the United States, who at the time was Bill Clinton, who introduced videos. He'd be like a computerized Bill Clinton. And I listened to his pitch and I said, that sounds pretty interesting. Yeah, let me think about it. And what I did was I thought about it and I realized that I loved the idea. So I went into my little recording studio and I produced a pilot of the show that night. I did my Bill Clinton impression, which I had been getting paid to do on radio and in commercials for some time. And I believed that it was the best one going. And I created this interface with Adobe After Effects that made it look like the computer-generated Bill Clinton was interacting with the viewer. And the viewer likes and dislikes, like you see during a presidential debate where the blues and the reds go up and down. That was happening on the screen while he was talking. And put in some computer sounding special effects. And I output that and I overnighted it to the guy at MTV. And he called me the next day, blown away, just blown away that I had done all that. And he said, that's exactly what we're thinking. That's exactly the show we want. So he made me a creator of the show. He made me an executive producer of the show. And he gave me full creative control of the show because I demonstrated the kind of passion that people in Hollywood respect, that kind of passion where they hand you the football and you run with it beyond their wildest expectations. Oh, he also made me the star of the show. So one of the cons of pitching an idea in Hollywood and selling it is that you don't make a lot of money. You don't get fuck you money, as they call it. There are so many channels and so many shows. And I know so many people who I came up with in the comedy business who ended up getting their own shows. And they work so hard to produce these series. And they're only getting paid like, a couple $100,000 a year maybe. And when you break that down, they're probably making less than minimum wage because the work hours are insane. They're working 12-hour days with no vacations. It's really madness. So nobody's getting rich off of their pitches that they're selling to Hollywood. Even if you don't have to do a lot of work, if you write a screenplay and you sell it, let's say you get $20,000, that's going to go, 15% to your agent, 15% to your manager, 20% to taxes. How long did you work on that screenplay? If you spent 3 months on it, that leaves you with, I don't know, like $5,000 a month. It's like a pretty normal, decent amount of money. It's not any kind of winning of the lottery. All right. So one of the other big cons of pitching ideas in Hollywood is that you have incredibly low odds of success. It's very unlikely that someone is going to buy your pitch. Like 5,000 to 1, I'd say. And there are some things that can increase those odds, which we'll talk about. But this is to counter the conventional wisdom. I think a lot of people think that if they go to a pitch fest, they're going to make some magical connection, or if they know someone who knows someone, they can mention their idea and they'll say, that sounds amazing, I'll buy it. And it just doesn't happen. It's not a normal thing. So it is true that when you execute an idea yourself, you do have control. But one of the other pros, and this counters the conventional wisdom, you actually make a lot of money, or you can make a lot of money when you execute an idea on your own. I'll go back to my first best-selling book example. When I self-published that book, I had to pay for the printing myself. I shelled out $5,000 to print 5,000 copies. So I paid $1 a book. And I was pretty sure I'd sell it because it was a pretty popular comic strip in a few different newspapers, but I wasn't sure. And I went to bookstores and I sold the book. The cover price of the book, I believe, was $12.95. So the way the discount works for bookstores is that the bookstore gets half. So I sold it on consignment. There was no publisher, there was no middleman. I made $6 on every book or so, $6 or $7. And they sold out. So I multiplied my money times 6 and ended up with $30,000. Pretty good money. And I used 5 of that to print another 5,000 books and make another $30,000. So that was already, work that I'd already done. So it wasn't like I had to do a lot of work to make that money. And another example of making money doing it yourself is The Onion. The Onion grew to become a multi-million-dollar company, and we never sold it or pitched it to anyone. We just kept doing it ourselves, slowly but surely, and eventually created a great deal of value for that particular creative endeavor. The other pro that you get from executing ideas yourself, even if you don't pitch them and sell them, is that you have what I call standing. So standing is different than legitimacy. Legitimacy is when you are a made guy in the mob, you've sold an idea in Hollywood, you're part of the club. Standing is when you're not in the Hollywood club, you're outside of it still, but they respect you because they have seen and noticed what you're doing. So if you build a YouTube channel into enough followers that you're on the radar and that they see you and they notice you. If you enter a movie in a film festival and it gets some attention, you have standing, even though you haven't sold an idea yet. People in Hollywood respect people outside of Hollywood who can build an audience on their own. And that gives you standing. It makes them want to meet with you. It makes them want to ask, what else have you got? Because they always want to be in business with people who can create that on their own, because that means they're the sort of person that you can hand the football to and they're going to run for a touchdown because they've clearly demonstrated that they know how to produce a project, bring it to fruition, build an audience, and all the other stuff. One of the cons of executing things yourself is that it is really hard work. However, it's hard work to pitch an idea and sell it and work on it. So either way, you're going to be signing up for hard work if you want to produce a creative project of any kind. They're very labor intensive, but hopefully we all love doing comedy. It's a labor of love and nobody minds working obsessively on a project. One of the cons of executing it yourself as opposed to pitching it, though, is that it does take a lot more time. When you pitch an idea and sell it, they plug you right into their distribution networks, and suddenly you're getting exposed to far more eyeballs than you could ever on your own. You'd have to do it very slow and steady on your own, like I had to do with The Onion. And even with my book that I mentioned earlier, the cartoon collection book, I put in the time and I put out that book myself. And once it made the New York Times bestseller list, I got a call from a big publisher who wanted to publish the book. They wanted to take it over and do all the work and just pay me a royalty like any normal book, like a regular author would get with a publisher. And they were the best publisher I could have hoped to hear from. They were the publishers of the Calvin and Hobbes books and the Far Side books. They were literally the best in the business in terms of cartoon collections. So I said yes. And I signed a contract with them. And suddenly my book was for sale in every English-speaking bookstore in the world. And it was being, mass produced and mass published. I made less money doing it that way than I did when I self-published it and hand-delivered it to bookstores. Because when I hand-delivered it, I was making $6 per book. I was making half. When I signed the deal with the publisher, I was making 7.5%. That's a pretty typical amount that an author gets on a book. So even though they were selling more books, I was getting so much less in terms of my percentage that the money didn't add up, and it was not enough. It didn't even compare. Okay, so here are more cons about pitching. We've talked about a few of the pros. One of the big cons, when you pitch an idea, you are ceding power to the pitchee. So Hollywood is high school with money. That's a famous saying from Martin Mull. And I think it's even more accurate to say it's mean girls with money, because it's just a big popularity contest. People want to be in business with people that they like and who they think are cool. They want to be in the cool group. They want to go to the cool parties. They don't want to associate with the nerds and the people who aren't cool. When you're an unknown person pitching an idea, you are one of the uncool kids. No one wants to be seen with you. No one wants to be your friend. No one wants to hang out with you. No one wants to go to parties with you. That's just how it is. Another con is you are giving your idea away. So whenever you put ideas on your pitch list, know that they could take it and you could lose it. It happens all the time. I wrote a screenplay about a boy from the future who comes to the present from the future, and he's got all these sorts of cool gadgets, and it's like a fun, like family comedy sort of idea. And I pitched that idea to Disney. About a year later, Disney, they passed on my movie, but they came out with the TV show Phil of the Future, which is about a young boy from the future who comes to the present with all these cool futuristic gadgets, a fun family comedy. I'll tell you another story. I made a short film called Tycoon Tyke about a baby that becomes the CEO of a major company. About a year later, a woman writes a children's book called Boss Baby that is optioned by a major movie studio, and they make the movie Boss Baby. Now, do I know for a fact that these people saw my work or remembered my pitch and stole my idea? I don't know. All that matters is it's possible. And there's very little I can do to exploit my ideas once these competing ideas are out there, because then it looks like I'm the one copying. So the way you have to deal with that reality is go into a pitch knowing that they could take your idea. So if you execute the idea and make it yourself, there's less chance of them doing that. And you have more of a claim. Like, for example, my Tycoon Tyke movie, you can find that on YouTube, uploaded months before the Boss Baby book came out. So if anyone really cared and wanted to look it up, they could see which one came first. But if it's just a pitch, like with my Future Boy script, you have no way of proving it, or nor would you even want to, nor would you care. Why? Because you have thousands of ideas in your idea vault. And if somebody steals one of your ideas, you need to chalk that up to, great minds think alike. I'm going to move on to the next idea. And also, you should congratulate the people who had the successful idea. I emailed the development executive at Disney who produced Phil of the Future, who happened to be the same person that I pitched the idea to. And I said, congratulations, looks like a great show. Not trying to be passive aggressive, just trying to be legitimately happy for their success. And same with the lady who wrote the Boss Baby book, whose name I forgot. I sent her a little note saying, congratulations on optioning the book, great work. That's how you succeed in Hollywood, by being happy for other people, not bearing grudges, and letting any issue you might have wash off your back like water off a duck. And be confident in the idea that you have thousands more ideas. And if a couple of your ideas got quote unquote stolen and made into big projects, you should take that as a positive sign that your ideas can connect with people and you have good ideas. One more story about people stealing ideas, and it's a cautionary tale. Does anyone know who that is?
Art Buchwald.
Ron, was that you?
Yeah. Oh,
Excellent. Yes, that is Art Buchwald. Art Buchwald went to Hollywood and pitched a movie idea about an African prince who comes to America to find his bride. And they passed on the idea. Paramount passed on the idea. A few years later, they develop and release Coming to America with Eddie Murphy, which is that exact same storyline. Now, the reason he's here is because Art Buchwald did not let that wash off him and send them a nice note saying, hey, congratulations on the wonderful movie. He sued them. He sued Paramount Pictures and got a settlement of, I think, $200,000-$300,000. He never worked in Hollywood again because nobody wants that kind of energy in Hollywood, somebody who's going to piss in the bathwater. It's a very small town. It's a very small community. And somebody who's going around suing people will never be invited to another pitch meeting again. Third thing on our pitching cons list, your idea is worthless to them. They hear so many ideas, and so many of the ideas are similar. The idea really isn't what it's all about. It's about you. They're interested in you, your personality, what you bring to the project, your passion, and also what other ideas you have. They're almost always more interested in your other ideas than whatever idea you're coming to them with. That's very common. All right, and then another pitching con here is that you'll likely get sucked into development hell, which, in case you guys don't know that phrase, it means when Hollywood buys your idea, but they keep changing it. They keep giving you notes, and it just warps it beyond any sense of where it originally was or any resemblance to your original idea. If you ever want to read a horrific cautionary tale about development hell, read the book Monster by John Gregory Dunn. He came to Hollywood pitching this really interesting idea about one of the first female news anchors in network news, Jessica Savage, who was tragically killed. And the idea was so raked through the coals in development hell that it ended up being this ridiculous, fluffy, romantic comedy with Robert Redford and Michelle Pfeiffer that had nothing to do with anything. And the sad part about the book is that he didn't even realize he was in development hell. He thought, well, this is how Hollywood works. All right, so let's look at a few other examples in this arena of ideas that are pitched versus ideas that are not pitched. I'm going to show you a bunch of examples of ideas that were not pitched that did really well. We've already talked about The Onion. Who thinks that if we had pitched the idea of The Onion in its first year, this is an issue, front page you're seeing here from year 1 of The Onion, who thinks we would have sold that? Who thinks anyone in the entertainment industry or the publishing world or the magazine industry would have been clamoring to get their hands on The Onion? Well, I'll tell you, the answer is none, because we did pitch it to the local Madison, Wisconsin news weekly, which is called the Isthmus. And they passed on it and said, you might want to think about getting the coupons off the front page. And the real irony now is that the Isthmus is going out of business. They were kind of a mainstay in Madison, Wisconsin for decades. We already talked about my book and my comic strip that it's based on, Jim's Journal. Who thinks that if I had sent my comic strip to the big syndicates, including Universal Press Syndicate, which is owned by Andrews McMeel Press, who ended up ultimately publishing my books, who thinks they would have picked that up and signed a deal to syndicate my comic strip if I had sent it to them without ever doing it myself, without ever making a book and selling it myself? I can tell you there too, the answer is they would not have, and no one would. I submitted so many comic strips to so many different big syndicates before I did that comic strip. They all rejected me out of hand. I wrote this book as part of my Second City masterclass, where all the students in the class contributed to the book. In 2015, we produced this book, Trump's America. That was this big, full-color, hilarious comedy book about what life would be like if Donald Trump was elected president. And we pitched it to major publishers through my agent, and they all passed. They all said, Trump is going to be, we're having a summer fling with him. He's going to be gone by the winter. And that didn't happen. He kept getting more popular, and then he won the Republican nomination, and then he won the presidency. In February, the year after he was elected, Simon & Schuster came calling, and they said, hey, we want your book. And they gave us a $50,000 advance that we split up amongst all the students in the class. So everybody got their money back from the class plus some. And there's an example of an idea that wouldn't have gone anywhere if we had only just pitched it. The fact that we did it ourselves and put it out is what got the publishers interested. In 2004, I decided to start doing a podcast that made fun of George W. Bush called The Weekly Radio Address, because back then the president would do this thing every week where he would do an address on the radio for a couple of minutes every Saturday morning. It had gone back to FDR. It was this long-standing tradition. And I thought it'd be fun to do that, make fun of him. And the podcast became very popular. And we got a lot of listeners, and we actually got an offer to do a book based on the podcast, a fake biography of George W. Bush. We got a $250,000 advance for that book. And again, we worked for 2 years on the book. There were two of us. You do the math. It's not a lot of money, but it's a pretty big book deal for a project that no one would have bought if we had gone and pitched it. First of all, my George W. Bush voice was not really that great when I first started doing it because I was still working on it. It took me doing the podcast every week to get better. And then eventually I got to be so good at doing George W. Bush that I got hired to do him for radio commercials, radio shows. I got hired to do him on Saturday Night Live on one of those TV Funhouse cartoons. So there's an example of a lot of opportunity and money and success that came from not pitching an idea and just from executing it myself. Does anyone know who that is? That is Robert Rodriguez. Robert Rodriguez is a very famous movie director. He directed Spy Kids and that amazing Sin City series of movies, the Frank Miller graphic novel movie versions. A lot of you may not know that he started out as a college kid in Texas who signed up to do medical experiments so he could earn enough money to make his own independent film for $7,000. And he edited it himself on his VHS machine, and he sent it into Sundance, and they were blown away by it. And he became the toast of Hollywood from his $7,000 film. Once it got to Sundance, it was called El Mariachi, and they released El Mariachi after putting a little bit more money in the production. And then they made a kind of remake slash sequel with Antonio Banderas and Selma Hayek, which is a delightful action movie. Who thinks he would have sold his pitch for El Mariachi if he had gone to Hollywood and pitched that movie? Of course he wouldn't have. They wouldn't have been interested. He was hoping, his best case scenario was, maybe I can sell it to the Mexican home video market. And he just got lucky and got into Sundance, and then he was the toast of Hollywood. Everyone wanted to be in business with Robert Rodriguez. And if you haven't read his book, Rebel Without a Crew, highly recommend it. You could buy that book and you wouldn't have to go to film school. That book has everything you need in it. Who has heard of this book and movie, The Martian? So Andy Weir wrote this book on his blog. He wrote a chapter and uploaded it, and the few people who read his blog said, hey, that's pretty good, you should write some more. So he wrote some more. He wrote another chapter and another chapter. Pretty soon he had a whole story, and people said, hey, you should put that together and sell it on Amazon as a book. So he did. Slapped a cover on it, put it on Amazon, and people liked it and they bought it. And then a major publisher optioned it, and then a major publisher sold it to movie studios. Suddenly it's a major movie with Matt Damon. Who here thinks that if Andy Weir had gone to a movie studio and pitched his idea of a guy on Mars trying to survive, who thinks he would have sold that if he hadn't written a word of it? Anybody know this show, Teachers, on TV Land? Here's a group of Second City performers called the Katydids. They're a group of 6 women, all with names either Katie, Caitlin, or some derivation of, who had their own little sketch troupe. And they partnered with a production company in Chicago to produce a series of shorts called Teachers, where they played the roles of teachers in an elementary school. A good number of them actually did work as teachers in school, so they knew what they were doing. And they made these shorts and they were pretty funny, and they got a little traction on YouTube. And I found them at The Onion and put them on the Onion's channel and gave them a little bit more exposure. They went to Hollywood and got themselves an agent based on their show, and their agent sold the TV series to TV Land. Who here thinks that if the Katydids had gone to Hollywood and pitched their idea of a TV show about teachers, that someone would have bought it, sight unseen, without them having made it themselves? Does anyone know who that is? We all know who that is, yes. So Steven Spielberg is perhaps the ultimate example of what I'm talking about here. Instead of going to film school and going to Hollywood to pitch his ideas, Steven Spielberg just started making movies. He made his first feature film at age 17. It was called Firelight, and he released it at a local movie theater in Phoenix, Arizona, and charged money for tickets. After that, he made a World War II film. After that, he moved to Los Angeles. He was a late teen, early 20s, struggling filmmaker, couldn't get into the USC Film School, kept making movies. He made a short film called Amblin on 35 millimeter. He got some money to invest in making a really good looking film. His other movies were all Super 8, so they didn't really look that good. But how do you get anyone to look at your film? Well, he went on the Universal Studios tour and hopped off the bus and snuck into the studio and found an office that was empty and put Steven Spielberg, director, on the door. And then he snuck back the next day wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase and waving at the security guard, hoping that he wouldn't get stopped and asked for his ID. The guard figured this guy must belong here, so he let him in. And he kept coming into the studio every day, going to his fake office. And he would meet with other editors, and he would watch people direct movies. And eventually, an executive at Universal figured out there's this kid sneaking into the studio who's acting like he's a director here. And he wanted to meet him, and he was impressed by his moxie. And that producer was named Sid Sheinberg, and he looked at Steven Spielberg's film. He looked at Amblin, and he decided, it's a pretty good looking film. Why don't we hire you to direct some TV shows? Which was an unheard of thing at the time. People who directed TV shows in the late 60s were all old men in the union. You did not hire a 20-year-old to direct TV shows. And so he directed a few episodes of TV shows. He was very creative. He was very energetic. Then they gave him his first TV movie, a movie called Duel, which if you haven't seen it, you should all watch it. It's an amazing first movie. In fact, Steven Spielberg says he still watches it to this day to remind him of the passion that he had for filmmaking, because he achieved so much with so little in that movie. And then after Duel, he got Jaws, and you know the rest of the story. Who thinks that if Steven Spielberg at age 19 had gone into a movie studio and pitched himself as a movie director, who thinks he would have been hired if he hadn't done all this work himself to showcase his passion? Nobody, right? Okay, so let's say you have the opportunity to pitch something. Like, let's say you know somebody, or you're at a pitch fest, or you know somebody who knows somebody, and you get a meeting and you can pitch something. Let's talk about actually pitching an idea. There are 3 essential ingredients to a successful pitch. Number 1 is you have to have an idea worth pitching. And you know the way to do that, because you know that quantity equals quality. So you need to have thousands of ideas so that when you get a pitch meeting, you're going to tailor that pitch to whoever you're pitching to. If that person works at Adult Swim, you're going to know, oh, okay, I'm going to pick some idea that would be great in a sort of weird stoner late night animated type of context. And that's the idea that you're going to pitch. If you're pitching the Hallmark Network, you're going to pitch one of your family friendly ideas about a horse that gets sick and they have to put him down or something. So make sure you have an idea worth pitching. Number 2 essential ingredient is yourself. Because as you know, they're not buying the idea, they're buying you. And so you have to bring your best self. You have to be comfortable in your own skin. You have to be engaging and interesting and funny and likable. And that takes practice. You're on the spot when you're pitching. So I highly recommend that you take improv classes, that you perform on stage as much as possible so that you can be comfortable in a stressful environment like that where you're expected to perform. And number 3, you should bring your enthusiasm, because nobody's going to buy an idea from anybody that's not passionate about that idea. In fact, Jen Kirkman is a comedian who pitches a lot of ideas in Hollywood and sells a lot of ideas. She has a saying that she invented that is, if you cry, they buy. Meaning if she's telling a personal story from her life and she gets teary, they'll buy it, because that tells them that they know she has enthusiasm and passion for the idea, that she's not faking it. All right, so those are the 3 essential ingredients. Here are 3 helpful ingredients to a successful pitch. It's very helpful to have an agent. If you don't have an agent, you're one of the uncool kids and nobody's going to want to meet with you or buy your pitch. When you have an agent, that means that someone else in Hollywood believes in you, and that's everything. That's everything. That gives you standing. I want to tell you just a little bit about agents. So that is Ari Emanuel. He was a big-time agent who started the Endeavor Agency, which ended up buying or swallowing up William Morris Agency. And I had a run-in with him that taught me everything I need to know about agents. He saw my first feature film on videotape. I sent it to him because he often handled independent films and took them to Sundance. And he saw the movie and called me up immediately. And he said, dude, amazing movie. We're going to make everything happen for you. So excited about it. And I was like, oh, great. And I actually knew his name. I knew who he was. And he asked me what was going on with the movie. What's happening? And I said, well, I'm about to go to this independent film market festival in New York to meet with some people and introduce them to the film, see what happens. And he said, awesome, let me know what happens. So I go to the independent film market in New York, which they don't do anymore, thank goodness. It was a horrible event. And he calls me on a Sunday from the slopes. He's literally skiing with his family. He calls me from the slopes on Sunday and says, dude, what's happening with the movie? And I told him the worst thing I could have possibly told him. I told him the truth. I told him, there was something wrong with the print, but I screened it for a couple of audiences, and I got a couple of business cards from a couple of people, and pretty much just ended up watching the movie with my friends at their house. Never heard from him again. So all I would have had to do was spin that a little better and told him I had a couple of really great screenings, got a couple of business cards. Happy to send them to you. He would have said, great. And he would have taken those business cards and he would have used that he would have parlayed that interest into a bidding war and gotten my movie sold before it ever got into Sundance. Because that's how agents work. Agents thrive on action, activity, interest. And if somebody talks to them who's boring or bored or it doesn't seem like they're going anywhere, they lose interest immediately. Agents are like birds. They want shiny, flashy things that move. And if you're not that, they're done with you. I ended up getting other agents and all that, but that was a very instructive encounter with an agent. It's very helpful to go into a pitch when you have a track record. If you have sold shows before, if you have made shows before, you'll be in a much better position to sell a show. Or if you've sold a screenplay before, you'll be in a much better position to sell a screenplay. If you don't have a track record, you should bring a partner with a track record. So I went to pitch this animated show idea when I was at The Onion, because The Onion had done all these shows that were like fake news type shows, and none of them had really taken off. So I came up with this idea for an Onion show that was not a fake news show, but it was still an Onion show. And it was an animated sitcom called Area Man. And it was just about this regular guy and his kind of pathetic small town life. And I had done some animation. For example, I'd made that Tycoon Tyke cartoon and other short animated cartoons. And I had been a successful cartoonist, but I'd never sold an animated TV show before. So I partnered with this guy, Steve Dildarian, who produced and created The Life and Times of Tim on HBO, which was a very successful animated show. And with us both there pitching, we sold the show to Comedy Central really easily. We pitched it a few other places and had some interest, but we ended up going with Comedy Central. Had I not partnered with him, probably wouldn't have had that kind of success. So what is pitching really? A pitch meeting is a meeting between potential coworkers. They want to know how you are to work with, what you're like to be around. And again, you're not there to pitch the idea, you're there to pitch yourself. So you want to pitch your idea, but you don't want to be all business. You want to be ingratiating and fun and funny and interesting and likable and high EQ. Very important. You want to ask about them. Don't have it be all about you. And here's a pro tip. You want to invite them to a cool party. So if you're in your 20s and they're in their 30s, they want to be plugged into what the young people are into. So if you know of a cool party, invite them to it. It's a really great trick because they will often say yes. And then suddenly you're more on a peer level with them as opposed to on a alpha versus beta level, which is the level you're on when you go into any pitch meeting. And here's another pro tip. Follow up with them after the pitch, even if you don't successfully pitch anything. Try to stay in touch with them. So the way I followed up with those people that I pitched to by congratulating them on the success of their other show, or if you see that they won an award or got a different job or sold a different show that had nothing to do with what you pitched, send them a little congrats. They love that. People in Hollywood love that. Any reason you can have to follow up with them and stay in touch with them that does not feel stalky and that is not weird and that is not you asking for things, but is instead you offering things. You can offer things like, hey, I know this really funny, creative person who might have some really interesting ideas you might want to hear about. Like that's an interesting offer that you can give them. Or again, inviting them to a cool party. Anything you can do to stay in touch or follow up with them is a great strategy for successfully pitching ideas, because you'll often, in fact, I think it's safe to say you'll never sell your first pitch. You'll sell your 100th pitch. So in between there, you're going to have 100 meetings with different development executives. You're going to meet with an executive and then they'll get a different job at a different studio and you might meet with them again and you might not even remember them. But if you followed up with them, it'll be a meeting of friends and you'll be on a much better playing field to sell an idea. How a pitch meeting normally goes is you wait in their lobby, you go in and exchange pleasantries, you pitch your idea, they thank you for coming in, and then you leave. Typically 10, 15 minutes. What can you expect from a pitch meeting? You can expect that they will say no, but not during the meeting. They'll love you during the meeting. They'll say, that sounds like a really interesting idea. And then they'll tell your agent no. You can expect that they will steal your idea. And don't be offended. That means they liked it. Just make sure you have thousands of other ideas that you're ready to go forward with. So losing one idea in a pile of thousands is not going to be a crushing defeat for you. You can expect that they will be working somewhere else in a matter of months. So be nice to them. And also be nice to their assistant, because in a few months, their assistant is going to be a development executive somewhere else. And if you were really nice to them, they'll remember that. And they'll accept your invitation to come and pitch them if they get a job as a development executive. They'll have a soft spot for you in their heart for the rest of their life in Hollywood. How do you make the most of a pitch meeting? You go to a lot of them. Make sure you bring idea number 2, idea number 3, and idea number 4. Don't ever just come with one idea, because they will always say what else you got. Respect their time. So yes, you want to be ingratiating and cool and funny and all that, but don't waste their whole day. Give them the old Midwestern, I'm sure you're very busy, or I'm sure you have to go, or even if you used to say, I have another meeting I have to get to, whatever. Don't draw it out. And very importantly, have fun. People want to be in business with people who are fun to be around, who make them feel good. Hollywood is such a twisted place that people will buy a pitch from someone if it's a terrible pitch, but they really like the person. If it's a great pitch and they hate the person, probably not going to buy it. So if you have a great pitch and you're a great person, you're in a really good position. So ultimately, my advice when it comes to pitching is make them pitch you. Execute ideas yourself. Build an audience, build a following. Make them find you, make them court you, make them follow you, make them hound you. It's the best way to pitch ideas, because then they're pitching you. Then you're not the beta and they're not the alpha. Then they're the beta, you're the alpha. And you're in the position of saying no to them, which is, by the way, the most powerful thing you can say in Hollywood, because everyone's desperate, everyone's saying yes. If you say no, it's only going to make them want you more. Here's a few miscellaneous tips about pitching. They will offer you a drink, most likely. Take the drink and do so boldly. By that, I mean, if they ask, do you want a water? Say, yes. Have you got it with a lemon twist? Have you got sparkling water? Because the water is likely the only thing you're going to get from this meeting. Another tip, read Writing Movies for Fun and Profit by Tom Lennon and Ben Grant. It's a really great, down and dirty book that's also very fun and written in a very funny way about what it's like to be a person who pitches comedy ideas in Hollywood. Tom Lennon and Ben Grant have pitched movies that have grossed over $1 billion. So they know what they're talking about. And they paint a very realistic picture. Again, I recommend that you take improv classes. Tom Lennon was a brilliant improviser and is a brilliant improviser. You've seen him. He's the star of Reno 9/11. And he brings that performing energy into a pitch. So he's fun and interesting and funny and likable. And he puts on a little show and they love it. And you need to be able to do that. Another tip is you should know your idea, the concept behind it, inside and out, and know how to summarize it as well as get into the details if they want. The first thing you're going to want to do is summarize it so they can get the general elevator pitch. But then if they ask any questions at all about it, you should be ready with answers. And that is my little lecture on pitching. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Any questions?
I have a question.
So,
So you can't see me, but
I can hear you.
yeah, you can take us off the share screen.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
you talked about the stealing of ideas, which I really appreciate your perspective on that. just curious, does copywriting help at all? Like we were kind of taught here to just copyright our material right away, or like scripts, things like that.
It's not a bad idea to copyright stuff right away, but you're never going to use that. You're never going to go to them with a lawyer and say, hey, I copyrighted this first, and so I'm going to sue you, because then you're still Art Buchwald.
Yeah.
So basically the importance of getting a copyright on a piece of work is that if someone steals your work verbatim, which almost never happens. So stealing ideas isn't even illegal. Like there was no copyright infringement on any idea that I've ever had, quote unquote, stolen, because it's just a concept. It's a baby who becomes a CEO. You can't copyright that. So if someone copies your idea verbatim, nobody's going to fault you for suing them. Or actually, you don't want to sue them. You just want to send a cease and desist letter to make sure they stop doing it, and you have the proof, you have the copyright. So that's really the only reason to get things copywritten. And oftentimes it's not people in the industry who will steal things verbatim. It's bootleggers and amateurs who will try to copy your book and sell it on Amazon themselves and stuff like that.
I guess my follow-up to that is use that principle for this execute yourself route too. So if I like you went through the ringer of producing something, right, and it hasn't been bought or distributed anywhere, but then you pitched it and then you see it get made after a no. Is that the same general consensus that you would feel, or?
Yes. It's very rare that you would execute something yourself and pitch it, and then somebody makes something just like it. The one example that leaps to mind is the Meet the Parents movies. So I forget his name, but there was a guy, a Chicago filmmaker, who made this comedy movie called Meet the Parents. And it was a story of, new husband comes to meet the wife's parents and all the wacky mishaps and antics that ensue. So Robert De Niro's company bought the rights to the movie from him. And part of the deal was he could never speak to Robert De Niro. He could never mention that he had made a movie called Meet the Parents. They wanted to buy it out completely. And they did it for like $200,000. And so those movies went on to make millions and millions and millions. That's more typically what would happen. If you execute something yourself and you're out there making money with it, like, for example, my Tycoon Tyke cartoon was out there and I was using it as an animation reel, and I was getting work doing animation. And they can't stop me from making that money. Like, why would I need to go after them if they're making money off of their project? That's their project. They did the work. They get to make the money. That's not my money. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Scott, I have a question kind of similar to his. Sorry, you can't see me either. But
That's okay.
when the executives like take an idea, I agree with you that you shouldn't sue. You should be the bigger person and mature about it. But doesn't it make them look bad?
Yeah, but a lot of times they do it without even realizing it. It's like Robin Williams used to steal other comedians' jokes, and he didn't realize it because he would watch their act and he would just absorb it. And then when he was up there improvising for an hour, it would slip out.
Yeah.
And then if someone came up to him after a show and said, hey, dude, you took my joke, he'd say, oh, I'm so sorry. And then he would pay them. He'd give them a bunch of money after the fact because he felt bad that it came out. So yeah, they might feel bad, but I don't think they are aware most of the time. And if they are, that's their bad karma to live with.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Scott, following up on some of this, and maybe this is just the Southern woman in me. Whenever you're sending these follow-up notes that are like, oh, congratulations, how wonderful. Is there a part of you that's saying like, I see you and you made a mad thing? I guess, how much, I don't know. It's an excuse to follow up, but do you still feel yourself gently touchstoning the person when you do that? And have you ever received a negative response during that?
No, it's always a positive. It's always in Hollywood, everybody acknowledges that there is dark animosity below the surface of everything.
So that is it's not a blip.
No, that's how everything is. You meet somebody at a party and it's go, hey, I love your work. And then you part ways and I fucking hate that guy's work. You know, that's how Hollywood is. So they know that, but they appreciate the overt gesture. You know, if you send somebody a gift, like that's a great thing to do in Hollywood, is to send somebody, like if you meet with somebody for 15 minutes, good chance you talked about some book or something that, hey, have you read this? You heard about this? And they're like, no, send it to them, you know, send it in a package. That's a wonderful gesture that doesn't have any of that I see you energy that you're talking about. It's just a purely magnanimous gesture. And that will put a little capital in your bank, a little social capital in your bank with them, so that when you send the email, hey, congrats on the thing, they'll see it as more of a pure goodwill gesture.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Question about when you're pitching, do you pitch the fact that it could be somewhat of a personal connection to the story, or is it always unrelated to you as someone who's pitching?
Yeah, I think you always want to pitch it as a personal connection. Like I said, Jen Kirkman's great advice is if you cry, they buy. So talk about how deeply personal it is to you, but try to make it about the idea, but just make sure that that personal connection shows up in the emotion in your voice.
Does it validate your idea or your experience with the concept?
No, it validates it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Carrie, this on?
Yeah, thank you for giving us all this information. First and
Sure.
foremost, I think it's been really informational, educational, and obviously you've done a lot of things. And I'm guessing because we're all pitching, everyone's going to ask you. So I want to ask you now: would you like to go to a cool party later?
I appreciate that you took that tip seriously, because it is a good one.
That's a no, Carrie.
Then I'll be sending you a gift shortly.
Yeah.
No, the secret answer to that question is that I despise parties and I never go to them. So I'm sure yours is awesome, but I respectfully decline.
You could just point out that you're in Minnesota.
Yeah. Also, I don't live anywhere too close to you. So, but these days, you know, if you say yes, you could be signing up to some horrific virtual party of some kind.
Sorry, another question on, I understand and I appreciate your perspective on like the conventional versus actual wisdom versus like the pitch versus developing yourself. If you do develop something yourself, like your own project, I guess I'm talking specifically film or TV, do you have any recommendations on like first steps? Like, would you take it to festivals, or would you just try to like, are you then pitching after that, or are you, you know what I mean? Like, what's the best way to get into distribution and or be seen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that's more of a secondary question. Like the first question should be, how do I make something that's really good and that I'm proud of? And then get it online, send it to as many festivals as you can, and then move on to the next project. You know, yes, you can find people to pitch it to and you can send it to people, but it's so much better when they come to you. It's so much better. So if you start producing things like Lonely Island is a great example. The Lonely Island 3-person sketch troupe started doing sketches on YouTube, and they weren't sending them to agents. They weren't sending them to festivals. They were just putting them up on YouTube and they were just having fun. And they did enough shorts that eventually they built a really big following and they reached a critical mass. And one of them, Andy Samberg, gets hired to be on SNL. You know, they get an agent and people are clamoring to be in business with them. They get a movie deal. They make Don't Stop, Never Stopping, right? Superstar. And that's the real recipe, is do it because you love it and keep doing it because you love it. And then, yeah, make sure it's reachable to people, but don't make that be the final goal. Make the final goal, how can I produce as much stuff as possible and make it as good as possible?
Thank you.
Sure.
What I'd like to do, if we can, is let's just take a 5-minute break and then come back and do the pitching.
Sure.
And if there's more time for questions after, we can. So let's take 5. Thanks, Scott.
Awesome. I'll talk to you guys in 5 minutes.
See you in 5.
Oh.
Am I in the way?
Now who's not nervous about pitching to this guy after he listed all his accolades?
Sorry.
Yeah. I don't know how well my feminine energy is going to go up with share Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Well, he certainly wasn't anything negative.
Of course not.
Are we back? I think you guys are muted.
We will be in about 2 minutes because these guys are a little bit slow. Let me run out and get them moving.
Wrangle
Wrangle them, exactly. I'm the student wrangler.
them. Student wrangler.
You actually wrangled me so well.
I wrangled you with the
So well. Wrangled. We're just missing Sarah and Rivers would be fair.
Wait, so Scott, did you say you like are no longer affiliated with the Onion? Like you sold it or your share?
Correct. Yes, I'm no longer affiliated.
Nice.
Can I tell you, while you were giving us that wonderful presentation, your square was so much smaller, and I thought it looks like a film behind you, radio. Like it looks like a camera. A camera. It looked like a statue of a cat to me. And the whole time I was like,
Oh, that's funny. This thing right here?
yeah, I thought it was for sure. I thought it was a cat statue, and it's
Yeah,
not.
it's a Super 8 film projector.
Oh. Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool.
Thank you.
Much more cool than a statue metal.
Next to this
Yeah.
landline.
Yeah. I love the aesthetics of your background.
Why, thank you. Yeah, I had this shelf built because I had all these books and all these knickknacks. Like this microphone right here is a gift that the other writers at The Onion gave me for creating the Onion radio news. It's like a genuine old time radio mic that actually works.
Wow.
With the Onion logo on it. It's very nice. But yeah, so I didn't have a place to put all my crap, and it was all like in boxes and in different closets. And so it's very nice to have it spread out, because now like all the books I've written, everything in all my movies is like on the wall all the time, and it's nice. It's kind of inspiring.
Yeah, I have a somewhat inspirational view behind me on my home Zoom, but if you just go past the camera range to the outside, it looks like a war zone. Behind me looks like organized. This guy knows what he's doing. All right, Sug, we're gonna start with you.
There you go. I'll go first, actually. Suggs is better than mine.
Sug is just, yes.
Oh, before we get started, Ron, do we have someone keeping time so we can make sure to fit everybody in?
Yeah, what I'll do is I've told everybody 3 minutes.
Okay. And how many people are there?
11.
11, 10, 11, yeah.
That takes I mean, how late are we going?
We're going till 4 o'clock.
All right.
So we should
In
be fine.
3 minutes, we'll have plenty of time after.
Yeah, so
But we'll do our best. Hello there.
Hi, how you doing, Scott?
introduce
Good. How are
yourself.
you?
I'm well. I'm Steve. Thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciated your talk.
Hey, Steve. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. How you doing today?
Real all right, thanks.
All right. All right. Very good here. I love when people are all right. I'm all right as well. All right, you ready?
Yeah, what do you got?
Here we go. Okay. I'll start with the log line, okay? Humanity's only hope to stop an impending alien invasion is 7 inept civilians participating in an experiment on a space station.
Okay, so let me back you up there. Is this a movie, TV series? What is it? Movie?
So this is a movie,
Okay.
feature length.
So, yeah, it seems like a pretty decent idea. Like if you got 7, comedy actors together that are like bumbling, bored, annoyed with each other type of people on a space station.
Yes.
A great inciting incident for that setup would be a really serious alien attack. It reminds me of Galaxy Quest a little bit.
Yes.
But that's a great movie, and this is different enough that it's not even like, it's not a concern. It's a good thing that it's similar
And
to
it's,
that. That was like almost 20 years ago now.
And it's a little bit like the feeling of you mentioned Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was funny. In my mind, it's a little bit like that in the sense that it's like a guy who really has no business being there, and he gets wrapped up in this plot that has enormous stakes surrounding it, and it's in space. So there you go.
Sure. So like you could start a movie like that with all these people who hate each other or bored to death on the space station, and there's a new person coming in from wherever. And so we kind of see it through that person's eyes. They're joining this team, everybody who stinks of BO and hates each other, and he's got to join them and be in the cramped quarters. And he's coming with all these great new ideas about how this could be so much better. And then of course he's totally ill-equipped. They're all ill-equipped. Yeah, it's a great log line for a comedy movie. I don't know what your plans are with it, but if I were you, I would write that as a spec script and just keep that as a calling card. You know, but it depends. Like, what do you want to do in the industry ultimately?
Ultimately, I'm hoping to be kind of a slash, like a performer, director,
Okay.
kind of person. I've done professionally before. I've worked in the news business as a producer, which you have to, there's a lot of crossover between a news producer and a director. You have to
Yeah.
work through a lot of levels of production. You have to work with talent and technical people. And I found I was pretty good at that. So that's
Good. So yeah, it seems like, you know, you're going to want to make yourself, you're going to want to tee yourself up for as many opportunities as possible. So you're going to want to be performing and getting yourself on YouTube, making shorts, and having a screenplay in your back pocket would be a great thing. So that if someone discovers your work, or if you ever, you know, start going out and pitching stuff, you've got that in your back pocket, depending on whatever you're going to be up for in terms of work. And the other thing you could do is make it, but I didn't really get into this earlier. Yes, I've made 2 feature films, but I would not recommend to anyone to make an independent feature film. I think it's basically modern day indentured servitude, and you shouldn't do it. Having said that, make it with your buddies on your iPhone for $2,000. Don't raise $300,000. Don't try to get a name actor. Don't try to make it look professional. Don't shoot it on expensive cameras that cost a fortune to rent. Use the Robert Rodriguez method and shoot it with what you have for the money you can afford and not a penny more, because ultimately all that matters is it good? Is it funny? At that level, nobody's looking for production value. And if you try to have good production values, it's just going to look sad that you tried. So don't try.
especially if it's in space.
Yeah, it's all about the writing. Like, for example, so Dan Weber is a writer who used to work at The Onion, and he writes for The Simpsons now. And he made a film in college that was like an outer space adventure movie. And it was just laughably bad. All the props were made from cardboard and tinfoil, but it was very creative and very fun. And there was one actor in it, Todd Hansen, who was the Onion head writer at the time, who has the most amazing physical presence, the most amazing voice, and he's an incredible actor. He's like a Marlon Brando, who's never, actually he has acted, even though he has no voice demo tape, he has no agent. He gets hired to do professional acting jobs all the time because people see him and they're like, oh my God, I must have you in my project. And so he does a lot of voices on Adult Swim, on the cartoon shows and stuff. But Todd's part was so funny because he so believed that he was in the moment. He so believed his character that dichotomy of this terrible movie with the cardboard props juxtaposed with him being Marlon Brando was fascinating and funny. And ultimately that's what an independent film is going to have, elements like that, where you just have to do your best and you just have to put it together and know that it is what it is. And the important thing is to produce as much of that as you can, as often as you can. So you don't, another problem with making an independent feature film is that you spend all this money and it takes so long. And in the time that it takes you to make one movie, you could have made dozens of shorts, and you're going to be a much better director and producer after making dozens of shorts cheaply than you will be after making one feature film that can only fail. It literally can only fail. To get into Sundance and to sell your movie, you've got a better chance of winning the lottery, you know?
Okay, we need to stop there and go to the next one.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
I'm taking full advantage of the fact that I know we have extra time.
Okay, we're happy to let you take advantage of us.
Hi, Scott. I'm Sug.
Hey, Sug, how are you?
Good. I just want to ask, do you have a bottle of water? Let me lemon in there or something.
I'm sure my assistant hooks you up with a bottle of water.
Ron's got lemonade right there. So
Yeah.
Okay.
all right. This is a pitch I wrote. So this is a full pitch set. Remember a time when parents weren't around because they were busy working long hours and kids were out on their day all alone, where you had to be brave and risk something to learn something? I do. That's why I'm excited to present to you my TV series, Latchkeys. Latchkeys is a coming-of-age comedy for a generation of kids that raise themselves. Sug struggles to figure out life in a middle-class Chicago suburb as a Korean-American kid. Every situation is an adventure to explore or an embarrassing lesson to learn, usually both. This is more than a coming-of-age comedy or an immigrant family story. It's about people who grew up having to figure out life on their own and the specific nuances that made each journey different. Sug is a young boy who has to learn quickly that he doesn't belong anywhere. He wants to be in everything, though. He's not white enough to be American and not culturally educated enough to be Korean. As the youngest of three, he constantly is trying to piece together the truths of life as they fall to him like table scraps. His brothers don't have time for him because they face the same challenges. He only has his best friend, Jay, and who is his number 2 in this game to beat the most life's most challenging level, middle school. Where on your body do you put deodorant? Why does everyone have to become a boyfriend? How do other kids have so much money? Why does it feel like my teacher hates me? How does everyone always know more than me? And what is the appropriate way to use a hot tub? The obstacles are infinite, but
I want to stop you there, Sug. So first of all, I think that's a pretty workable idea. I don't know what it is. Is it a TV series?
Yes.
Okay. And if you said that, I apologize. I missed that. I think it's a worthy TV series idea. I think it's almost like 2 different ideas: the Latchkey Kids idea and the Korean American idea. So I don't know if it's like a first generation Korean American story, or if is that what it is, or is it?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so.
It's a little bit of both, but yes. Continue.
Right. But I think, with an idea like this, you want to pick one. So I think the Sug character could be one of the characters. And for your pitch, I would recommend focusing on one or the other. Like, talk about the whole latchkey kid thing. And I think nowadays we all see that as a Gen X thing. And that's something that millennials and Gen Z didn't have because they were so coddled. That's kind of the reputation. I don't know how true that is, but that's the reputation. And I think you need to work on the pitch so that you're saying it from the heart and not reading it. If you go into a pitch and just read something like that, nobody's going to buy it. Yeah. They want to, and especially if it's like your story, then you should tell it more emotionally and tell it, with more passion and just from memory as opposed to reading a script of the pitch.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my main thing. Like, there's a rule in entertainment that is one idea at a time. Audiences are very simple and they can't take more than one idea. So decide what one idea you're going to focus on and have that be the focus. Because if it's more than one, they're totally confused and nobody's going to buy the idea. And I do think you want to think about that generational thing, because I think millennials and Gen Zers are fascinated by the Gen X life, where their parents left in the morning and said, be safe, and then came back at home at night and said, how was your day? Because that's sort of a part of that's been lost to time at this point.
Yeah. And
people are really fascinated by that. And then, of course, the first generation Korean American story is a great story too. So pick one.
Cool. Thank you.
That would be my advice to you on that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sug.
Hi. I'm Megan Stockton.
Hey, Megan.
Nice to meet you. How's the weather in Minnesota these days?
Well, it's funny. It got to be above freezing. So everybody's like, oh my God, it's summer. It's only 32.
My daughter's up there. So I hear they can deal, you guys deal with anything. It's
It's unbelievable. And people are outside. It's 20 below and everybody's outside, you know, cross country skiing and ice skating. They're very active.
It's good. Well, it's a good place to live.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
We're getting the sun here, so I'm hoping that spring's on its way.
Sure.
Thank you for your time today, and thank you for
Sure.
seeing me. My concept is personal because I owned a retail store for 14 years, and every day there was a story that just kind of fell into our laps. So the concept is for a sitcom, and it's about the owner of a store interacting not only with the employees who are the team members trying to support this party planning retail business, but also trying to keep the sanity of what's happening within the community and all the celebrations, whether they're birthday parties and anniversaries, but sometimes celebrations of life. So there's kind of the ups and downs. It's a sitcom, but it does have some sort of dramedy aspect to it. But often there's that sort of I Love Lucy component when they're production lining many, many gift bags or something goes wrong in the supply chain.
What's the store? Did I miss that
The
detail?
store is called Retail Therapy. And the idea is that there's so many times where you're not just pulling off a party or dealing with the day-to-day stuff. You're giving a lot of therapy to people who are going through all these celebrations.
I see.
And to the customers, but also to the employees as well as they navigate life.
What does the store sell?
The store sells a lot of things that support anything that goes along with those celebrations. So party favors and gifts for the parties.
So it's a gift shop.
It's a gift shop and party shop, gift shop.
Okay. Like the party zone, or is it more like a fun zone, or is it more like Hallmark gifts?
No,
Sorry, I think that's important because that's a key part of the concept is what the store is.
Yeah, it's actually from a more affluent area. So there is sort of that component of trying to outdo each other. And there is a similar business in town, and they're kind of always one-upping each other in terms of what they pull off.
So that makes sense as a sitcom device. Is it's a gift shop, high-end gift shop, and it's so high-end they don't just sell gifts; they actually offer retail therapy, and they counsel people who have all these first world problems in terms of their celebrations, stuff like that, right?
Exactly, and that's from everything from quinceaneras to anniversaries to birthdays. The stories that come out of that, and seriously, the one-upping from party favors, the obscene amount of money that people will spend to get the attention of those that are coming.
Do you have a funny title for this show?
Retail Therapy.
I think it needs to be funnier.
Okay.
And I think it should have the word gift or party or something in there, like party poopers or, something that's a little more of a zinger that makes people go, oh, what's that?
Party down.
Yeah, that might work. I mean, I would come up with a big list and like test it, but I feel like that's a key part of your concept. And so what is your goal with this? What are you planning to do with it?
I would like to create a sitcom that has kind of an ever-evolving cast of characters because in my experience, I've had so many interactions with all these different ages, different generations that kind of bring a different moral to the story that I would like to, what would I like? I would like season after season of a fantastic sitcom that you fall in love with these characters, you empathize with these characters, and sometimes you hate these characters, but you keep coming back to find out what's going to happen because you can relate to these characters.
So are you going to make this as a web series on your own, or how are you going to make it happen?
Well, I came to this class hoping to learn how to screenwrite and put some of these things into words and learn that process. So having your talk today and hearing kind of about the pros and cons has maybe changed my narrative of how I want to approach it. I've often thought that some of these elements could be very funny even in a podcast. So
sure. That's an underrated format for testing ideas. Like do a radio drama as a podcast.
Right. And my generation is listening to a lot of podcasts because they're often multitasking. So I'm so surprised by how many of my girlfriends are saying, have you listened to this podcast? And it's so viral. It's almost this, they're choosing that over anything that they can actually watch on television because it's portable and they really can just pick and choose. So
yeah, and the actual use of radio drama is underutilized in the podcast world. Most podcasts are just idiots having conversations. Very few people are doing scripted dramas that rope you in and get you interested in what's going to happen next and have comedy. You know, in the golden age of radio, it was sitcoms. It was like Burns and Allen.
yes.
And, you know, who's the one I'm thinking of? Charlie McCarthy. You know, there were family dramas before Leave It to Beaver and before all that sort of stuff. People did listen to that on the radio, and there's no reason why. I mean, there is one big reason why, and that is the art of writing radio drama has died, and no one knows how to do it anymore. So you can do that, and you can produce it so cheaply.
Yes.
You know, you're living in Chicago, you're surrounded by brilliant improv performers who would probably kill for the opportunity to perform in a radio drama for free. And you could just start putting out episodes and basically make them happen exactly as you want. And you could do it really cheaply.
I love it. I love that idea.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing.
Thank you.
Sure. Good luck
Thank
with
you
that.
so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.
You too. Thanks for coming in. It's so funny, the leveler knocks out the applause. So after, when people applaud, something happens, everybody just goes dead silent.
I'm used to that.
Hey, Scott, I'm Carrie Stewart. Nice to meet you.
Did you say Terry or Carrie?
Carrie with a K.
Carrie with a K, how are you?
Yeah. I'm great. Thank you. Thank you
Great.
for today, for meeting
Sure.
with us. Really good information. I love,
It's my pleasure.
yeah, I really,
One of my secret pleasures is coming and talking to the Harold Ramis Film School.
well, I really like kind of the, bootstrapping it. It's kind of like just get out there and do it is the bigger overall message is what I'm getting. So I like that idea because it makes it much less intimidating. Okay, so
Fun. Comedy should be fun.
it should be. It shouldn't be stressful because
Correct.
that's kind of funny in itself. But
Yeah.
do you have any experience in the wrestling world, like high school, middle school, anything like that?
As a matter of fact, I was on the wrestling team in junior high school.
Okay. Well, my idea is called, this is subject to debate, but right now it's called Wrestling Moms. And the inspiration behind it is because my daughter in 7th grade decided that she wanted to stop playing club soccer and wanted to be a wrestler, which was completely out of the blue for us. And we went for it. And if you know wrestling, you know what it's like at a wrestling match and scenes at a wrestling scene. So this movie idea is a mockumentary that would follow the paths of like 5 families going to the Reno World's Championship at the end of the year. So they'd start off in the season and it'd be kind of like Best in Show meets Talladega Nights. So it's like these really funny, bold characters. And like, since you've gone to wrestling matches, I know like they're a dime a dozen. You can walk in any place and write 100 characters just walking in because it's crazy. And I'd be amiss if I didn't admit that I was crazy too. You go out there and you're like, I'm cool, I got this, you're filming and you think everything's fine. And the next thing you know, you're on the mat chasing somebody who's like beating up your child.
Yeah. So that sounds really potentially fun and interesting. I'm thinking about execution. Like it would take a lot to do that with actors, and to fill a gymnasium, and it's a lot of production value and stuff like that. But I have more logistics questions. Like nowadays, so in my day it was boys only. Nowadays, is it co-ed sport?
Well, so when my daughter started, which she's 19 now, so she started in 7th grade, but when she started, she was wrestling all boys. So that's actually part of this because when a girl wrestles a boy, it depends on kind of their family that they come from and how they react. So they don't want to lose. So they either just completely pummel the girl, or they come from a family that's like, don't, be nice to the girl, which is not right
So
either. But
is it,
now
is it one of
there's
those-
girls and guys.
yeah, is it one of those situations where it's mostly guys and just a handful of the girls who are like, hey, I want to wrestle, even though I'm a girl, and the school by law has to let them because they can't discriminate? Is that the situation that's happening
No,
now?
it's evolved more than that. It used to be that way. Like it used
I'm so out of touch with high
Yeah.
school sports. I had no idea that was happening.
Yeah, it used to be that way. And they didn't have, like, they were letting girls on the team, and it was basically if you could win the spot. So like my daughter was still wrestling boys her freshman year in high school, and she was the 106 varsity wrestler on the boys team because she could beat everybody in that spot. But if she couldn't, she'd be like, the pecking order.
Right.
So anyways.
Yeah, I remember it was all about weight and whether you won or lost.
Oh,
So-
yeah, and everything behind that. Like the first Reno tournament that we went to, and we had never gone to like this big tournament. It was my daughter's first year. We were going, and one of the families in our neighborhood, we saw them, like we were driving through Eastern Oregon, and we saw them on the road, like driving slow in their SUV, and we pull up, and we're like, what are you doing? And we look out the window, and their son, who weighs 75 pounds, has to get down to 70, and he's jogging on the side of the road in there.
Yeah,
Well,
I remember that.
drinking
I
their
remember
Slurpee.
kids starving themselves to get
Totally.
down. Yeah.
Totally. So
That's so interesting. So yeah, it would be interesting to see how you could pull that off. It might be one of these, a calling card screenplay where you write it and then people can see what your humor sensibility is, but
Yeah.
it'd be tough to produce it, unless somebody like Christopher Guest picked it up. But he doesn't really make those movies anymore. I don't know who would do that now.
yeah, I'm not sure either, but I mean,
Yeah, it's a funny idea and you should write it up.
yeah, I plan to, and like I said, the content's always there. Like this weekend, I'm gonna go watch a couple of matches just because I want to. Like I haven't been in it because my daughter was out the last couple of years because of COVID and everything. But yeah, thanks. I think it's a really
Thank you.
funny
Yeah,
idea. I think like as far
I
as
think so too.
the content is there, and it's not that hard to find.
Right. Well, thanks for coming in, Carrie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
More dead silence. How are we doing on time, Ron?
We're fine so far.
Yeah.
It's 3:20 and we've got 6 to go, so we're fine.
Hello to you, sir.
Hi, name's Peter. It's nice
Peter,
to
how are you?
meet you. Real quick, you're in Minnesota, right?
Correct.
Right. Are you like a big Prince fan?
Yeah, I've always liked Prince.
Yeah.
Almost saw him in '83, and couldn't get in at the First Avenue bars where he used to perform.
Yeah. Nice. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, the idea that I have, it's a feature film. There's two main characters. First one, his name is Manny. He's a hopeless romantic. He's stuck in retail and he's looking for a change in his life. And this is where he meets a new coworker that he has to train, and he instantly falls in love with her. And eventually, after a few days of training her and getting to know her, he asks her on a date, and she reluctantly says yes. And they go on a date, and this is where he finds out that she is a thief. And the thief's name is Stephanie, and she ran away. She pretty much left her town because she got caught from stealing from kind of higher authority people. So she's on the run and she's trying to make a new life for herself, but that comes out during this date.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. What is the sort of elevator pitch? What's the log line that you would go with for this?
Pretty much just a young man in his mid-20s meets this person out of nowhere, and she turns out to be a thief on a date.
Yeah, you need to, so for this to be a comedy, you need to have that be
Right.
more ironic. So the main character needs to be like a goody two shoes, so you have contrast between the characters.
Mhm.
And yeah, it seems like a totally serviceable comedy screenplay idea.
Mhm.
you kind of want to, I'm sure you have I assume you have like the plot worked out for what happens after.
Oh yeah, there's more to it.
Yeah.
Just between the characters.
So what's your plan with that? Are you gonna write it up? Are you gonna try to produce it? What's your thinking?
Yeah, I plan on writing it out. And,
Okay. Yeah, that's another great screenplay to have. When you're starting out as in comedy and you start meeting agents, and if you want to do any sort of writing or filmmaking or whatever, the first thing they're going to want is, do you have a screenplay? Do you have a TV pilot? Do you have some sketches? Because those are what the jobs are. The jobs are, I can get you a job on a late night show. I can get you a job on a sketch show, or I can try to sell your screenplay, or I can, and that's basically it. Like, they're not going to sell your TV pilot until you have some experience. But that's a perfectly good script to have in your back pocket. But as far as the pitch goes, you definitely want to go in with a little more passion and like give the log line, instead of like going into the whole story like you did. That you want to hit them in like one sentence. Who's fighting whom and for what? It's basically what you want to tell them. So they get the whole high concept of the piece, So yeah, good luck with that. Thank you. You guys should have kept the applause going while Pete got to it. That's a painful last few minutes of the walk when somebody doesn't get applauded off. Hey there.
So Scott, thank you so much for doing this. My name is Lori Hollins, and
What's your first name again?
Lori.
Lori, hi.
And I am here reinventing myself.
That's always fun.
I was a practice. I don't know, some days. I was a practicing OBGYN and infertility specialist for over 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And had some major life changes and have always wanted to do something artistic. And over the last 5 to 7 years, people told me I was funny. So I've done some stand-up and improv and stuff like that. So I'm in comedy film school.
That's great.
So medicine informs a lot of what I write. And so, like I said, I was an infertility specialist for almost 30 years.
Writers who are doctors or lawyers get so much work because everyone wants to see TV shows and movies about doctors and lawyers.
Okay, well, great. So this is, I've actually
lawyer back there.
I've actually changed my, I have tons of ideas. So I just actually came up with this idea, and it's a movie, I think, and it's called Dr. Egg, EGG. So the log line is a secretly militant Black physician owner of an egg donor agency for infertile couples misrepresents that egg donors are white, upper middle class, college educated women, but flips the script and uses Black egg donors for wealthy white couples, challenging racial constructs when the babies are born and appear to be Black.
So that's very interesting because we hear about those stories in the news where a guy at a sperm bank is like impregnating all the women himself and stuff like that. I don't know that anyone's ever done a movie about that stuff, but it's a very interesting subject matter that people are fascinated by. So that seems like a real winner to me.
Yeah, it's kind of like a reverse eugenics almost.
Right, exactly.
And, infertility is like a $15 billion industry. So that's kind of what and that's what I know. There's one of my favorite movies is called Gattaca. I don't know if anybody's seen that.
Oh yeah, I know Gattaca. That's a good one.
And then there's, there are a few movies on infertility. For example, The Odd Life of Timothy Green, the cartoon Up. There's a storyline about infertility in there.
You couldn't have kids, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of my idea. But like I said, I have tons of ideas, but I think
yeah, write that one up for sure. Like that's a good screenplay to have. Yeah. And we haven't really talked at all about, we're mostly talking about pitching here, but we haven't talked at all about the craft of writing a screenplay. But work on the outline, like work on a 2-page outline that you can read to someone in 10 minutes.
Sure.
And read it to people and see how they react to it. Once people are enraptured, and tell you they loved it and they wanted it to keep going, you know you've got enough to write your screenplay. But until that time, don't write it, because people always write the screenplay too soon before they've really gotten all the story bugs worked out. They're so much easier to work out at that outline stage.
Okay. I'll do that.
So good luck with that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Scott.
Hey there.
I'm Julie Dolan. I'm a
Hi, Julie.
graduate of Marquette University,
Oh,
and
what do you know?
I totally know Jim's journals.
Jim's Journal ran in the Marquette newspaper, I believe.
Yeah. I had one particular clip on my desk that was, I'm sure you wrote a ton of them about beer, but it was like, last night I drank beer, today I threw up, or something like that. But it
I
was,
think Jim's roommate drank beer and threw up, but Jim never drank beer.
oh, very good.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
A little backstory on my feature film. My husband began a brewery about 4 years ago, and through his journey, I was inspired to write this film. In essence, it's a parody of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but with beer. The story starts,
Good pitch.
knowing you're an avid partier, maybe this won't go over so well. I could go to my other one if you want.
No, okay. Not only am I not an active partier, but I have celiac disease, so I can't eat gluten. So I'm twice removed from ever drinking any beer.
Well, then I'll get
But
you.
I get. What's that?
I'll get you a seltzer.
Oh, great.
You can drink
No, I think it's a great idea, and it's a really funny pitch, and it reminds me a little bit of that episode of The Office where Michael Scott put golden tickets in boxes of paper. But it's funny. It's ripe for a movie. Like, why not? And
Can I tell you a little bit more?
microbreweries are the thing.
Yeah, and I think that this movie would definitely appeal to a certain demographic.
Absolutely.
That likes beer and a little bit of laughter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a little bit more?
What's your plan with it? You gonna write it?
I have started it.
Okay.
I'm kind of on a second draft of fine tuning it. I am really excited about the characters I have coming into this. So the title is Heir to the Brewmeister. So the brewmaster.
Right.
So
Go ahead.
he sends out, he announces he's a recluse, and he's an eccentric. So he's been in hiding for like 30 years, and he announces this contest, and it's gold under bottle caps. And the protagonist is Charlie. He brews beer in a garage and works in his uncle's bar, and he has a total disdain for the cheap beer he's selling and the primitives that drink it, but he's passionate about his craft, but he's not quite there yet.
So a couple of tidbits of advice for you. I would make it different enough from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that the audience doesn't make the connection so much as the person you're pitching it to does. Because it's a funny pitch, but once it's like the same story but with beer, it's less funny.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call him Charlie. I would call him something else.
Okay.
And I would change enough about the story so that only after watching a third or a fourth of the movie, you're like, this is a little bit like Willy Wonka, but I wouldn't make it like hit you on the head with it. That's just my 2 cents. I think that would make it work better.
Yeah.
And then other tidbit of advice is what I was telling Lori, which is don't work on the screenplay, work on the 2-page outline and get that perfect. Get that to the point where you can read it to people and they feel like they've been told an amazing story.
Yeah. So this has been a great opportunity for me to do that, to really
Good.
hone in on
It'll be so much quicker in working out all the story bugs, because that's what writing 13 drafts of a screenplay is all about. It's working out story bugs, and people they spin their wheels for months, and you could do it all in weeks if you just focus on that 2-pager.
Yeah. definitely.
Yeah, so good. Have fun with that. That sounds like a great project.
Thank you.
You guys have a lot of good ideas today. Good. Normally, I'm like rejecting half of the things I see. And scrap it. Try something else.
It's all a credit to Ron.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get closer to you, Scott, because I'm tired of you being the best looking one in the room. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of your bobblehead run for your money.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll be the same size. That's important.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I didn't put these earrings on for nothing. We were talking earlier about your background. Do you have a favorite book in your background?
A favorite book?
Yeah, that's in your Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my favorite books are given away, you know, or I don't like keep books that I read. I normally have books around that I want to read, but I mean, what are my favorite books? Like 1984 is one of my favorite books. Watership Down. I love Jared Diamond books, Guns, Germs, and Steel. Like anything he writes, I'm just addicted to it. Yeah.
Well, that's good news because what I'm pitching has nothing to do with any of those reference points that you love. I'm very excited. What I'm pitching is a self-aware winking romantic comedy titled Neck Romancing. Dating is hard for everyone, but especially for mid-30s girl next door zombie who wants to find true love before she fully decomposes.
It's a great high concept comedy idea. There's any number of different ways you could take that, but yeah, zombie movies are huge. People never get tired of zombie movies. If you can figure out a way to make that into a wedding movie, you've got it made. Because wedding movies and zombie movies are two of the top.
You can't see me, I'm typing it up.
Yeah. Yeah, something about a zombie wedding. Like those are two basically huge chunks of red meat for the movie-going audience. Weddings and zombies.
Yeah, I mean, she can fully decompose at the wedding. It's very exciting. Very hard to put a wedding ring on a finger that falls off.
Right.
It's what I'm envisioning. Yeah.
And then I don't know how you're going to deal with the whole zombie thing, but people want to see zombies act like zombies in movies.
Oh, yeah.
Good. You're on top of that.
That's
Okay.
entirely. I want to see them holding hands, walking down the street, but she's dragging a leg and she's hissing and kids are running, but they love each other.
And occasionally they encounter a non-zombie that they have to ravenously chase and devour. Yeah.
Yes. Very,
like the falling in love montage would be part of it. Would be them chasing someone down and eating their brain.
Yeah, just sharing a loving moment in between.
Together. Yeah, like
a Lady and the Tramp with brains.
Picnic. Exactly. You got it. So it seems like you got a handle on this. Seems like it's going to be a really great sort of spec screenplay to write and have.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, well, I guess I'll get out on a high note. Won't waste any more of your time.
Was that an in-joke reference that I missed?
I'm gonna pull this back a bit.
What's that?
I'm gonna pull the chair back a little bit.
You should sit wherever you feel comfortable.
So hi, my name's Sarah Bishop. It's
Sarah.
really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Before, my idea kind of relates to something you mentioned before when you were talking about spectacular specimens like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I come from Australia. We're a very...
I never would have guessed that.
Oh, right. So we're a super sporty country.
Yes.
And I had a good friend there who just kind of had this thing for athletes. She was always dating athletes to the point where we used to make this joke that we would have to keep her away from the Olympic Village. And then that kind of struck a little idea. And so my idea is for a spec script for a broad sex comedy feature film called Go for Gold. And it's about two girls in their 20s whose entire goal is to get into the Olympic Village for the ultimate sex fest.
You know what that could be? What was your name again?
Sarah.
Sarah, that's right. That could be like a modern day version of all those 80s teen movies where boys were trying to get laid.
Yeah.
There were so many of those, and there was never a movie about girls trying to get guys. This is one of those movies, and you could totally like look to all those 80s boy movies for inspiration and look at like some of the weird antics, and obviously it would have to be a little different because girls are different and they're just looking for different things. But it strikes me that like it would be a good time to do a movie like that.
Yeah, because it feels
Yeah.
like I think as girls, like we never really felt like we had that movie. Like, and when I grew up, it was like the American Pie films
Right.
was the big franchise.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a whole, I guess, I go way back to the 80s, but there were some movies after that. I think things changed a lot after the internet, because before the internet, guys didn't have porn. And so they literally, like, they lived to like see a boob or whatever. That was like their highest goal in life. And, but you're right, there was never any movies like that about girls. For girls, the movie was always like the romantic comedy, find the one man to marry or whatever. But the closest thing I can think of is that show Broad City, where those, or maybe Sex in the City, you know, like girls going on dates, finding guys and stuff. But because it's a movie and because it's more like they're on a mission to find like hot guys who are athletes, I don't know, it just seems like it could be a really funny teen sex comedy sort of a genre.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank
So,
you.
good luck. Are you going to write that up? Or are you going to, what's your?
Yes, that's my plan. It's like, because we pitched some ideas last week to the group. I had a couple of other ideas, but this was the idea that really resonated with the room. So I want to do it as our final project for this year. Right. Yeah, write the script.
Well, have fun.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Hey, Scott.
Hey there.
Hey. Thank you for giving us your time. I really admire your work ethic and your last name.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
It's fun to say.
Yeah, it wasn't fun in elementary school, but it's fun.
So my pitch is for a half-hour episodic sitcom, kind of like about me, pokes fun at Gen Z and millennials, the younger generation, as well as just corporate America and all the unspoken silly rules. But my logline is, a recent college graduate, tired of corporate America's dignified lack of fulfillment, assembles a group of creative, like-minded people in pursuit of a compelling career opportunity, set to redefine professionalism to their own generation's standard and to prove a love for your career, coworkers, and personal life are not mutually exclusive.
So my brain totally went numb listening to that. I apologize. It needs to be a lot punchier and needs to have like more of a high concept. Like, let's work on a sort of log line pitch for you. Like, what are the key comedic elements of this?
I think Generation Z approaching corporate America and creating, in my mind, it would be a real estate company, just because real estate, like I'm a realtor technically, technically, but somehow, but kind of just because real estate is like an interesting business. It's not the typical 9-to-5 job, different every day, not in a cubicle. Like, I think it can lend itself to a lot of stories.
Yeah. So what's the Gen Z reputation in corporate life? Like, how are they, what's the stereotype of how they act in a corporate environment?
Yeah, so I think to look at like the pros and cons of Gen Z as well as like older generations, like Gen Z, you know, as you mentioned earlier, like kind of coddled, expect to just have everything given to you kind of, but they still work hard if they find something they love, and they tend to be creative and more approaching the do what you love. Meanwhile, baby boomers are like realistic, like get a job, earn money, support your family. And then Gen Z are out there like being like an artist, freelance.
Right. They seem, that's the reputation that I've gathered that they've earned, is like they're more interested in doing good in the world and following their passions than they are like making money in a corporate environment.
Yeah.
Right? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. And I think there's ways to like admire that and also like poke fun in it.
Yeah, totally. So I think like I didn't detect any sort of conflict. So it's a TV series, you said. Thank you for spelling out what the medium and format was. There needs to be some sort of central conflict and central sort of object of interest. And if it's just Gen Z in the workplace, not quite enough. So I think you need to work on that idea a little bit. This is the first time I've said this here today. Normally I say it almost every time, but what else you got?
That was to say, this is the one I've had in my mind because it's kind of like, was my approach, like kind of graduating from college, like before I decided to come here. I'll say I'm a recent college graduate for the next 2 years anyway, but I graduated in May, but kind of like corporate America lacks creativity, lacks fulfillment, and all those like silly unspoken rules that everyone just agrees are dumb, but they follow them anyway. Like I thought there's so much to poke fun in that as well as just Gen Z. So the way I kind of approached it was me being a realtor and liking real estate, house flipping and all that, like thinking that could be a fun way to have like 4 younger people kind of quit what they're doing. Like one was going to save up for law school, one was a barista who went to art school, and they each bring like a certain like gift that would make the perfect real estate team because it's kind of based off of my parents and my aunts and uncles. My mom's a realtor, my aunt's a real estate attorney, my uncle's a handyman, and they all flip homes together. So I was kind of basing it off of that.
Yeah, I feel like the idea needs to be reworked quite a bit, and I would highly recommend that you have more than one idea that you're working on. Like I said before, like if you want to be a professional in the comedy business, you got to have a lot of ideas, and it's good to have ideas on all the back burners and then work on one and then put it aside for a few weeks, work on a different one, because you're just not going to grow as much and learn as much focused on one idea. I think like focusing on real estate might be a more interesting idea than focusing on Gen Z in real estate, kind of like we were talking about way back with 2 ideas at once. You know, is it about a Korean American story or is it about a latchkey kid story? I think you want to pick one. And yeah, definitely try to develop some more ideas. Would be my advice.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy your weekend.
Hi,
Hi there.
nice to meet you. I'm Molly Chambers.
Hi, Molly. And you are also from another land.
Another land, exactly. Not Australia. The one that's
No.
like a different variation of the accent, but yes. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. I'm
My
a big
pleasure.
fan of The Onion. That was like my friends and I's only sense of humor for a long time in school.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. I was always so glad that we got a foothold in the UK because they're known for their humor and satire. And at first we thought, well, we can't compete. And then we sort of got a foothold over there, which is great.
Yeah, a big one indeed. Well, yes, I'm also Gen Z. And my idea is a little bit based off of that a little bit. So in college, I was part of I lived in a fraternity house, a big frat house of like 65 of us. And then halfway through the year, we got kicked off campus for reasons, accusations that were completely true. So couldn't really fight the allegations. And then this kind of based off of that because we all got disbanded, put across campus, they wanted to separate us. And all of us kept on finding very strange ways to continue to convene somehow. And so this is just like I guess an offshoot of that idea. What if? So the logline is a booted off / disbanded sorority and fraternity, one or the other, or both, move their organizations into a retirement home and attempt to recreate their college experience within the aged community, full of varied characters. And I had an idea of like the different generations kind of coming together and like it could be 2 different audiences, but maybe as you said, you mentioned maybe I should hone in on one idea, but that's one thing.
Yeah, so I feel like it's first of all an interesting idea. When you first started talking about it, you said that you were in a fraternity. So I don't know how they do things there, but here, if it's boys, it's a fraternity. If it's girls, it's a sorority. And we've seen a lot of frat boy movies here, like crazy frat house movies. Haven't really seen crazy sorority house movies. So if it's a sorority house that got booted off campus or whatever, I don't know, whatever the rules are that says you can have a sorority, the college took it away because they were just too outrageous. That's different here. Like we don't see that, but it reminds me a lot of those Neighbors movies with Seth Rogen and what's his name? And who?
Zac Efron.
Zac Efron, thank you. And so those are popular movies and people love that, and people love a crazy, like, unhinged college story. It feels like this is a fresh angle to go with a sorority. And so in a movie like Neighbors, they would have done one sequence about turning it into an old age home. So I don't think that's enough for a whole movie. I think you're going to have to come up with a whole bunch of different ideas for how they have to try to get in, or how they have to try to redeem themselves. And it has to be a whole thing. Like Animal House really set the bar high in terms of what you have to do, because they basically interviewed all their friends. What's the craziest thing you ever heard of happening on a college? And then they crammed them all into one movie. And, you know, National Lampoon's Animal House was a top grossing movie of that year. And it remains like one of the top grossing comedies. And that's why, because you want to throw everything but the kitchen sink into a college comedy. And those Neighbors movies do that same thing. So you're definitely going to be shooting yourself in the foot if you're thinking too small and just thinking of like one little story element. But it's a great overall concept, the idea of a crazy sorority, which I have not seen. So sometimes that's all it takes. Take a popular genre that we've seen a lot of big movies in and just twist it, different gender, you know, you're done. Like it's original, you know, because it's like a totally different angle. Even though they did have a lot of sorority jokes in those Neighbors movies, the main, I guess, humor came from the fraternity and the Zac Efron character.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's my advice on that one, and I hope you can make use of that and write it up.
Yeah, keep workshopping it. Thank you so much.
Excellent. You're welcome.
We've still got a couple minutes if anybody has any last minute questions for Scott.
I do.
Go ahead, Carrie.
You said something about, chunks of red meat. You were talking about some big things that you should do. Do you have any others that we should, like, what else should we be looking for, paying attention to, that are always big winners in movies? Like you said, weddings. I wrote that down because I was like, ooh, I could have a wedding and a wrestling meet. That would be
That's funny. Boy, yeah. Audiences love weddings and they love zombies. Look at like the popular genres and look at what's working. People obviously love superheroes. Those are incredibly expensive movies to make, but people love them. And, you know, if you want to write scripts and sell them in Hollywood, you really have to make them affordable to shoot. You can't write a big special effects extravaganza because the chance of somebody buying that and green lighting it are infinitesimally smaller than selling and producing a simple movie with a few people in a few different houses. You know, that's so affordable. And it doesn't take the entire chairman of the board and all the board members of a studio to green light that, you know? So yeah, just keep your eyes open, look and see what movies have historically always done well, and you'll learn a lot. You know, one of my favorite websites is Box Office Mojo. You guys know that site? It shows you what the top box office movies were of every year, and you can sort by year, by movie, by amount. It's really awesome, an awesome tool.
Other questions, Cindy?
Okay, I got another one then.
Sure.
I have two more questions. Do you think, how hard is it, do you think, even if the movie is good and the idea is good, to pitch a period piece like in the 80s now that we've come into a time of
technology, younger people, faster, shorter, less attention spans. Because I've had this idea for this movie, but it's based in the 80s, and I think I hear I feel like I'm feeling like pushback in it. I think the idea is good, but I don't know if it's just because of the genre or the time. Like, I think the 80s are really funny, and they were part of me growing up, and there's a lot of really comical stories around that time, just because of the times, besides what we were doing in our small town. But I don't know if I'm going down a wrong path in that, and that it's just exponentially harder because of the age of the people back then, and they might not connect with what's happening now.
Yeah, the only people love nostalgic movies and they love period movies, and the 80s are a very popular decade, probably second only to the 90s right now. But they're hard to make. The period movies are really expensive because you have to get all period cars, all period props. So consider that like a big budget, strike against you if you're pitching an idea like that. And nobody's going to green light an expensive movie unless you have a really successful track record of making other movies. So that's the only strike against it. Otherwise, yeah, people love that stuff. If you can do it in a radio drama or a comic strip or, any other format, a novel. By the way, we talked about The Martian. All you guys writing screenplays should write a novel of your screenplay and self-publish it on Amazon. You can upload it yourself. There's no barrier to entry. And it's a great way to test the idea. You have a novel and you can send that to people. You can refer people to that. And it's a great way to test an idea.
Okay, anybody else?
I've got a question. Sorry. Scott, with legitimacy and standing, what's the shelf life on those? Because if you sort of do something and you get a little bit of buzz, and then, you're going back into meeting rooms in Hollywood, say like 5 years later, how relevant is I guess, how much standing does your track record have? Or would you sort of be focusing on trying to make some fresh content that gets more buzz before you do another round of, say, big meetings or pitching in Hollywood?
Yeah, it's a good question. The cliche in Hollywood is, what have you done for me lately? Yeah. You're only as successful as your last project. So that's another reason why it's a good idea to keep producing, keep putting stuff out there, and don't try to rest on your laurels, So just to give you guys an example, I had a successful comic strip, then I launched the successful publication. And since then I started, teaching humor, but I was starting to feel like, well, those things are old. Like I should do something new. So I started doing a weekly podcast where I do 20 minutes of new comedy material every week. And it's called Scott Dikkers Shows Up. If anybody's interested, it's on YouTube, but it's also on all the podcast platforms. And for me, it's like really important to reconnect with what I love doing, which is just producing comedy. And also I tell all my students to do that, and I should be doing it. I should be putting myself out there and doing something current, doing something every week. And it's really a wonderful experience. I'm only in my third week right now doing it, but I get so much from that. It makes you feel alive to have a deadline and to be accountable and to have to produce comedy every week and put it out there. So yeah, great question. Put yourself out there and keep doing it. The old stuff will still be valuable, but it'll be more valuable if you're doing something now also.
Great, thank you.
All right, that kind of brings us up to our time. A couple things. Scott, I'll get the releases to you this evening.
Okay.
The other thing is, I don't know whether it's you I have to thank, but I will go to my grave saying the single greatest and most needed headline I ever saw in a newspaper was the headline in The Onion right after September 11th. God angrily clarifies no-kill rule. I have been hanging on my wall for years.
Quite a compliment. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, that was quite amazing. It's the only place that did comedy after September 11th, because even the Daily Show shut down for a month. Everybody shut down except for me. All right, so Scott, thank you very, very much. That was great. I hope you can hear it. Yeah, applause, everybody. I hope you can hear it.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Great. Very, very.
It was a delight talking to you all. Good luck with all your projects. And I hope to be seeing them and hearing of them out there in the world.
Terrific.
Right.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.